All right, this promises to be an absolutely huge video, so let's just get right into it. A few things actually. Let's get right into it. A few things before we start. Beautiful intro. I'm leaving that. This is going to be very different because I'm going to be covering all of Murakami's short story collections in one video, which obviously you know that. You can read the title. You came here, blah, blah, whatever. But there are two things that really I want to get into before I start with. The first has to do with my relationship. Well, okay, yeah. The first has to do with the ranking. I'm only ranking them insofar as it gives me a way to kind of sort my ideas. As I mentioned in the Raymond Carver video, I'm kind of not really sure how to review short story collections. I understand, like, traditionally it would be like going through and giving a summary of each short story and whatever, but to me that completely destroys the fun of finding short story collections and the kind of newness of never knowing what you're gonna get with each story. And while my reviews do tend to be more on the analytical side of things, and when I get into themes, I do go full spoilers. Admittedly, when it comes to short stories, I just don't want to ring out kind of everything about it to kind of go on and ramble about every single story when I may not have felt a certain way about that or another thing. So what I'm going to do here is talk a little bit about the stories that really stood out to me, for better or worse, but also talk about the collection as a whole and what I think it does well and where it fits into Murakami's overall style or evolution as a writer. And the second thing that I want to bring up, kind of on that point, is how much reading through these past few months has changed my opinion of Murakami as a writer for the better. Which is saying something, because I was already, and you can tell this by going back to any of my older videos, a huge Murakami fan. He was already my favorite writer, already hugely influential to me as a person, but it really has made me appreciate how much dimension there is to his writing that doesn't come across in his novels. So, for instance, his novels are always not necessarily criticized, but noted for things like a lonely middle-aged male protagonist. But while that is certainly a common theme in a lot of his short stories, there are a ton that are from a female perspective, from older people's perspective, from younger people's perspectives. Like, the dude can write so many more styles than you usually see in his novels. And it really makes a lot of the complaints against his novels that I see, it doesn't negate them so much as it changes the nuance behind them. Because he's not limited as a writer. It's that when he chooses to write novels, he chooses to write these certain things. He is perfectly capable of writing so many more things than you see in his novels. You just have to go to his short stories. And really quickly, I covered this again in the Raymond Carver video, but for anybody who hasn't seen that, to give the necessary context to this, for a long time, I was not a fan of short stories. I don't like... I'm more interested in characters and character development, where short stories tend to be really focused on saying one sort of theme and one sort of idea, whereas a novel gives you a chance to not only develop a cast of characters, but also gives you more of an opportunity to investigate the theme by giving you multiple different characters to bounce that theme off of and to be representative of that theme. So it's a much deeper dive. And in that sense, I've always found short stories a bit lacking. But I'm leaving Japan, and recently I ceased my Japanese studies and have instead taken this chance to read Murakami's short stories, specifically inspired by watching the movie After the Quake, which I didn't think honestly was particularly good, but I was surprised when I was going through my books, sorting things to take and leave, that I actually had a copy of After the Quake, so I took it to work and read through it and was surprised and got really into it, and from there moved on to the next short story collection, and I was basically hooked and really kicked off, I feel, a new discovery and appreciation for short stories, which, as I said, has led to me trying to write flash fiction, because I'm not great at short stories, but this idea of exploring a singular theme. So this is where I'm coming to it from. This is why I haven't read any of, despite having read all of Murakami's novels years ago, I haven't read his short stories. But now I finally have, and I don't want to say I'm kicking myself for not getting to them sooner, because I don't know if I would have appreciated them sooner, but wow, great time, great experience overall. So the reason, we'll just kick it right off, going with After the Quake, is my absolute least favorite of his collection. And again, when I say ranking, the ranking is kind of bullshit in the sense that some of them are just, like, I have reasons for it, but all of them I think are great. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend any of them, but when it comes down to it, After the Quake is absolutely my least favorite of his collections. And it's kind of a shame, because there is so much emotion behind it, particularly in context of the earthquake that it is set during. But I just find most of the stories to be kind of mid. So you have UFO in Kushido, which I enjoyed, and Honey Pie, which which I also greatly enjoyed. And Honey Pie I continue to think about. But Super Frog Saves Tokyo, All God's Children Can Dance, and Thailand are all just kind of forgettable to me. To be honest, I don't remember Thailand at all. But Super Frog Saves Tokyo in particular is such a popular Murakami short story, to the point where it shows up in both the film After the Quake, the animated film Blind Willow Sleeping Woman, as well as getting its own separate release twice, actually. I think once by Private Press. It wasn't Centipede. I don't think it was Centipede. It might have been Centipede. No, Centipede did Kafka on the Shore. Subterranean, I think, did Super Frog Saves Tokyo. And then fairly recently actually, got another independent release. So very popular Murakami short story, but it just doesn't do much for me. I find the main character, Katsuragi, I believe was his name, Katagiri, okay, fairly compelling, and I find Frog interesting as a character, but I feel like, even though I appreciate what the story is trying to say in terms of how individuals, despite seeming powerless, can come together and make sort of the big changes and fight against things greater than themselves, being them literal things like corruption and whatnot, but or metaphysical, more ambiguous things, like let's say evil, quote unquote, whatever that may be, sort of more metaphysical, like moral and ethical issues, can still happen via the individual, via things like imagination, which is such a common theme in a lot of Murakami's work. It's just one of those things where the ending felt so anticlimactic, and I understand that I didn't... Seeing the fight with Frog and Worm wouldn't have necessarily made it more interesting to me, or more engaging, because these sort of big battles aren't really what Murakami does well. It's not why I'm attracted to him. It's more the fact that the main character getting shot and missing it didn't seem to kind of tie into anything. And I guess on the whole, I just find the whole metaphor of Frog and Worm, like, it just doesn't do much for me. It's not bad. It just doesn't quite appeal to my personal aesthetic, let's say. But moving on from that to the one that sort of does appeal to my personal taste a lot. My absolute favorite in this whole story is Landscape with Flatiron. Which even when watching the movie, it's funny that was my favorite part, my favorite section from the movie. And then when I read the story, I was like, oh, they recreated it perfectly. And then I went back and watched the TV version again, and I felt that the TV version actually changed some things for the worse. But this one, I really appreciate the sort of regret, the sadness, the loneliness that Murakami captures in the story. I appreciate the sort of human connections in the most unlikely of places, which I've talked about a little bit in Raymond Carver's collection, Cathedral, specifically with A Very Small Thing or a Small Thing. I can't remember the name of the title off the top of my head. But this idea that isolated people living with their own problems, finding other isolated people living with their own problems, and how even though the problems aren't necessarily the same, the way they overlap and the way they give meaning. Landscape with Flatiron just feels so full of regret, remorse, self-loathing, but at the same time, despite having all of those dark things, the little light of sort of hope of how things can get better. And I think that that's really one of the reasons that I'm so attracted to Murakami's works is, to me, a lot of life can feel very hopeless, not in a totally doom or downer kind of way, but in the sense that you are such a victim to forces greater than yourself that trying to have a positive impact on the world, or trying to believe that the world is moving in a better direction, or even to just believe that there is a direction that is being guided in any kind of way, can feel so overwhelming and crushing, that I really enjoy stories that both acknowledge that overwhelming crushingness that comes both from external factors, as After the Quake does, with the constant references to the earthquake and its effects on people, but also the internal struggles that the character, let me see if I can find his name really quickly. I'll actually pause the video here. Miyake. How Miyake is not only living in a prison driven by external factors of the quake and his being absent at the time, but also the internal factors of his regret and his inability to forgive himself for not being there. And the way that those external and internal fuse to create a kind of living hell feels really relatable to me. And then the way that the character of the story, Junko, also has a similar circumstance, but even though you have these sort of two people living this struggle, they still find reasons to live, and they still find hope in each other, in their sort of shared hells. And you feel at the end that it's not going to be a sappy, happily ever after kind of better, but that there is, like I said, a light of hope. And it's a hope that, again, isn't an external hope, because all that stuff, like I said, is sort of bigger, can't be controlled, but more of an internal hope and acceptance. So that I really enjoyed this story, even though After the Quake is at the lowest of my rankings, and I will almost assuredly never feel differently about that. I enjoyed this story very much. So moving on to the next short story collection, and my fourth on my list, First Person Singular, which is his most recent book, or his most recent collection, I should say. And if I'm being perfectly honest, when I first read this collection, not the whole collection, but when I read the first three stories, I was really disappointed. Granted, I went from After the Quake to The Elephant Vanishes to First Person Singular. And I felt that the shift in Murakami's style, which admittedly going from The Elephant Vanishes, which it is his first short story collection, but between Blind Willow and Sleeping Woman and The Elephant Vanishes, chronologically, they run kind of concurrent. Some of the stories from Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman are actually earlier than some of the stories in The Elephant Vanishes. But basically, chronologically, you went from his really, really early work to his much more modern work. And the shift was so stark. And a lot of people talk about this when they talk about sort of Murakami becoming a bit tired, becoming a bit routine in his writing. And I've talked about this a lot in my The City and Its Uncertain Walls review, where I think his writing has changed. It's become slower. It's actually become more introspective. And I see it's become the type of thing where it's slow moving, but it rewards multiple read-throughs because you begin to appreciate he's become way more blunt about like the ending and the meaning. Like, especially in The Elephant Vanishes, there is a lot of reaching the end and having that like, whoa, that was crazy. What the hell was that? Sort of feeling about it. Like Barn Burning is peak example of you reach the end and you're just like, what did I just read? I want to go back. I want to like figure it out. Whereas Cream, to take a story from first person singular, the very first story, you read it once and it feels on the surface to me, it felt like I got everything he wanted to say because he was super blunt about it. The cream of your life, the cream de la cream, rises to the top, and you don't need to worry about anything else. But on reading it a second time, I began to appreciate some more details. And then when I reread it again a third time, wow, certain things really started to click in place where I started to appreciate the character's emotional journey a lot more. So for to give like a specific example of what I'm talking about, the gist of the story, the general gist, is that it's a guy reflecting on his life after he graduated high school, and he's kind of in an aimless state. He's an academic Ronin. He failed the entrance exams. He doesn't really want to go to a sort of high-level college, but his parents are sort of pushing him into it. So he gets... he's just kind of screwing around at this point in his life. Not frivolously going around sleeping with women, but rather than studying seriously for the re-exam, he's going to the library and reading books. And he gets an invitation from an old, not friend, person that he took, a girl that he took piano lessons with. And she was really, really good. And whenever they were together, his sort of lack of dedication would always annoy and frustrate her. So the fact that he gets an invitation to her recital really baffles and perplexes him. But he accepts. He goes out to this recital, which the venue is at the top of this long hill. It's a very long trip. He gets flowers for it even. And at the very top, he finds the venue closed. And there's obviously no recital going on here. So he goes down the hill and sits in a park and sort of asks himself, like, what am I doing here? And the first time I read it, I took it as a very surface level, like, what am I doing here? Because, like, I really wanted to know, it's funny how long it takes him to question whether the whole thing was just a scam, just a prank. And the fact that you never really figure it out frustrated me at the time, but it frustrated me in like a, okay, whatever kind of way. But reading it again the third time, I really appreciated, and again, this comes back to like sort of like I think about what I said earlier about it being obvious, where the A to B, the journey of the story, the arc in later Murakami's works is very clear. But the sort of path and road to get there has so many details along the way that you won't necessarily pick up. And this is what I mean when I say on reading it the third time, I appreciated that the question of what am I doing here, it's not just a question of like physically, literally, what am I doing here, but like literally, not literally, metaphysically, what am I doing with my life? It is this encapsulation of aimlessness, of purposelessness, where the whole thing of even accepting the invitation, like on a first read through, it's like, okay, whatever, he's just going to be polite. But the more I read it, the more it really is like, yeah, dude, you really like have nothing else going on in your life right now, that, you know, you're so aimless, you're so looking for purpose, that you accepted an invitation out in the middle of nowhere from someone that you barely knew, who you actively assumed disliked you, without checking in with them, without doing anything to kind of confirm that it's going to be real. You just kind of went with roses and flowers and whatnot. And, you know, not that he was trying to woo her or anything, but more just like you really got prepared for this, and it just turned out to be nothing. And in the story, there's a car going by that is doing, it's one of those speaker cars doing religious broadcasts, and appreciating on a third reading, like, okay, it's this guy, he's lost, he's looking for purpose, and then there's religion, which is offering a kind of salvation, a kind of direction in life, but then it kind of fades away, being like, okay, that's not the kind of direction, not the kind of focus that he's looking for, that he needs. So when you have the old man who talks, who appears to him, who talks about the cream, the moments in life that are worth living, that even though like kind of the first time I recognized, you know, okay, it's a story about not stressing the smaller moments in life, but really living for the greater moments, and appreciating them in the moment, and not getting so hung up on these in-between moments. It's really on the third read through, and I assume every subsequent read through, more and more appreciating the details of what those small moments are, that sort of sense of aimlessness, of really getting in and appreciating the character's emotional states at the time. So that's what I mean when I say, you know, it's kind of a rough example, but hopefully you're getting an idea of what I mean when I say that while they don't have these sort of shocking, like I said, abrupt endings of his earlier work, and while on first read through it can seem very blunt, I find that on rereading, there's so many just little details and character moments and recontextualizations of certain words and phrases that adds weight to the messages at the end of the story, that really bring such a richness and depth to his later work, that I think that his earlier work, while still good, while, you know, in many ways, you know, Wind Up Bird is still my favorite Murakami novel, it is just, they're just different. And this is where I talk about going through all these short stories, really Murakami's evolution as a writer. And this collection is fourth on the list, which I really struggle with a lot, because I feel like by putting it fourth on a list, and this is where I hate the whole ranking thing, makes it sound like it's not good or that it's lesser. But the reason that it's fourth on the list, a lot of it comes down to Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, and The Elephant Vanishes both having so many stories in them that they're just able to cover so much more. I mean, First Person Singular only has 7 stories in it, and given the type and whatnot, they're not super long stories either. And like the Occult Swallows Poetry Collection is borderline not even a story. It's absolutely fantastic. The poems are absolutely fucking hilarious. But there's not a story in here that I really dislike. So this is where I'm saying, like, aside from After the Quake being sort of perpetually at my lowest, just about anything from here on out, like, I can't say depending on the given day I'd change them, because I stand solidly by this, but damn, like, they're almost, aside from number one, like, they're so close. everyone brings something unique to the table. And if you're a fan of later Murakami's writings, of the slower, more mature, more thought-provoking, and God, I use mature, but that's another word I'm realizing now, that carries so many connotations that it sort of can be taken the wrong way. By mature, I mean a writer who has clearly written a lot and is no longer writing with a sort of youthful vigor that a lot of his earlier work had, but is instead writing in what I sort of think of as an older person slowly walking through like the park, the woods, examining things and taking in and honing in on sort of minutia. That's what I mean by mature. It's not necessarily like an emotional maturity by any stretch of the imagination. It's more that focus and emphasis on slower stories that draw more attention to the smaller things in life. And that is absolutely what embodies first person singular for me. And like I said, it's at number 4, but I think it's a great collection. Again, if it's where you start with him, you're not going to go wrong. So that's kind of first person singular. So before I bring up number 3, number 3, Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman. From here on out, Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, The Elephant Vanishes, and Men Without Women are pretty much going to be, whenever you look at anybody's list, I assume, sort of the top 3. It's difficult for me to imagine a world in which like somebody's number 1 is going to be after the Quake. I assume most people, their number 1 is going to be one of these 3. The Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, The Elephant Vanishes, or Men Without Women. And when it comes down to Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, and The Elephant Vanishes, they're really separate from the rest of his collections, in the sense that I think The Elephant Vanishes has 16, 17 stories in it, whereas Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman has like 24. And this is an absolutely huge collection of stories, 436 pages worth of short stories. And when I look at it compared to, like I said, first person singular and After the Quake, which by pure coincidence are extremely thin, like 6 stories and 7 stories respectively, and then you come to Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, which has 24, it becomes like, this is why I kind of want to talk about the nature of the books as a whole, or the collections rather, as a whole, rather than just breaking down all the stories necessarily, because if you're just looking at it in terms of volume, this is where I feel like The Elephant Vanishes and Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman will so regularly appear as people's tops, because there's so many different stories that you're just bound to find something that resonates with you. And not just 1 or 2 things, but probably several stories that, if you even remotely like Murakami, will sit with you. And that is absolutely the case with both of them for me. But it also just comes down to not wanting that sort of to overshadow the other collections in the series, the sheer volume of it. But the biggest reason, honest to God, I have sort of 2 reasons why Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman is below The Elephant Vanishes. The first reason is at least 2 stories in Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman are setups for Murakami's later novels. And I say setup, but and to be fair, in The Elephant Vanishes, you have The Wind-Up Bird and Tuesday's Woman, which ended up going on to become The Wind-Up Bird Chronicles, the leaping off point for that book. In Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, you have Firefly and, was it Cat Eater? What was it? Man-Eating Cats and Firefly, which went off to become Sputnik Sweetheart and Norwegian Wood, respectively. So in that sense, much with as with Tuesday and Wind-Up Bird Chronicle and Tuesdays, whatever the hell it was, I don't want to say you're getting robbed of a story, because it is important. It is there. But like with Man-Eating Cats, while the names are different and the relationships are tweaked a little bit, a lot of the verbiage is verbatim stuff from Sputnik Sweetheart, from specifically the conversation between Mew and... why can I remember that her name is like Violet, or it's a flower? God, I'm drawing a blank on it. Between Mew and the other woman when they're in Greece, and even in the story, I believe they're in a Greek cafe and translating the paper. Like, they're just so similar that you pass them over. And being that there's two of them in here and they're both longer, that's that and something else that I will get into when I get into The Elephant Vanishes are the only reason that this is really lower. But other than that, just what a fantastic collection of stories that, again, just cover so many different types. Although what you see here, and I guess what you see here is, despite the fact that most of these, some of these stories were actually before The Elephant Vanishes, the evolution of Murakami as a writer between the two, I think, is pretty pronounced. You see longer stories, you see more intricate stories with more not ambiguousness, but more ambiguity sort of to the interpretation, but also a lot more heart behind them. In particular, Hanalei Bay and the Iceman, I thought were really just heartrending in the way that they focused in on these sort of women and the tragedies that face them and how they deal with them. The Iceman being sort of a sad, tragic ending, and Hanalei Bay being more acceptance. And also a Shinagawa monkey, similarly. And this is where... So The Tale of Kaho recently came out in Japan, and one of the big things is it's the first Murakami novel to feature exclusively a female protagonist, which, yeah, there have been some female characters in the past. Awamame shared deuteragonist role with, wow, I cannot remember his name right now. Anyway, the guy in 1Q84, and in After Dark, one of the major characters was a young girl, but I say a young girl, a young woman, but younger, like teenager. With Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, and The Elephant Vanishes, you see a lot of very strong women characters, and very detailed women characters that bring to sort of perspective, like, where have these sort of characters been in his novels, specifically like as protagonists? It's not even that I dislike his novels. I love just about every single one of his novels. It's just, this is such a side to his writing that doesn't come across in his novels, that like I said at the start, it doesn't negate the criticisms against his novels. It just recontextualizes them, because they can really be like that dimension, that sort of not just femininity, but the way of treating the female characters with the sort of autonomy, with is nothing sexual about them. You know, particularly Hanalei Bay. You know, just what a fantastic protagonist you have there. Just really, really great. And I also enjoyed the titular Blind Willow Sleeping Woman. I thought was fantastic. Birthday Girl was really great. Again, just great collection of short stories. The only reason it's lower than The Elephant Vanishes is because, like I said, those two repetitions, but also I think The Elephant Vanishes, which I'll get into it, offers something more unique. But also, when I talk about... Sorry, I'm so late. I'm so overdue on this. When I say, like, a sort of a good mix of longer and shorter stories. So, actually, one of my favorite stories in this collection. Man, it's so hard to talk about favorites just sitting here looking at the table of contents because there's so many great ones. One of my favorites in it is Dab Chick, which is kind of an utterly nonsensical short story, very, very short, not even 10 pages long. And you get some of these stories that are incredibly short and almost goofy in a way. And they're sort of contrasted against these longer, more drawn-out stories, particularly at the end. So after Crabs, you have Firefly, Chance Traveler, Hanalei Bay, Where I'm Likely to Find It, The Kidney-Shaped Stone That Moves Every Day, and the Shinagawa Monkey. And these go from page 275 to 436. So the last six stories alone take up about 100 and what would that be? 190. Yeah, goddamn. Nope, not 190. About I am struggling at math on that. 160. Okay, man. Yeah, my mind is just going way too many different directions to try and do quick arithmetic. 160 pages, which shows you how much longer they get at the end there, as opposed to, like I said, some of the shorter ones like Crabs, which is let's see here, 8 pages. The Iceman, which is 12. And so you have a nice mix of short and long with Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman. The stories are, generally speaking, much more developed than what you get in The Elephant Vanishes. And I think if there's only one Murakami short story collection for you to own, I would still go with my number one pick. But I still think that Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman is the number 2. It's quantity and quality. So can't go wrong with that. But moving on, because I'm just kind of rambling at this point, The Elephant Vanishes. The big thing that I wanted to say about The Elephant Vanishes, and the reason that it's higher on this list than Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, despite thinking that Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman is overall a much more mature, deeper collection, is because The Elephant Vanishes represents that early state of Murakami where things were just wild, things were off the wall, and there's an energy to it that just doesn't necessarily get captured in his later work. It is, in relative Murakami terms, the polar opposite of first-person singular, where first-person singular has this sort of slower, meditative vibe to it, where you really have to sort of stop and take in the roses. So many of the stories in The Elephant Vanishes just kind of come out and hit you with the energy of a hurricane, from the second bakery attack to on seeing the 100% perfect girl on a beautiful April morning, which that one in particular, like, it's such a short story and yet it's so memorable, so sticks with you. It's just perfect, quintessential early Murakami, that feeling of loss, but short, sweet, to the point. Just fantastic. My personal favorite, Barn Burning, which is great. But you also have some longer stories like Sleep, which, again, fantastic female protagonist. Shows very early on that Murakami can write women, can write very developed women with interesting interiors and interesting problems. This is, I don't know why. Okay. Hunting Knife from Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, and The Last Lawn of the Afternoon from this story are both really interesting in how it almost feels like Murakami is playing with a different style. I mentioned in my Raymond Carver review that sometimes Raymond Carver's stories, not often, but sometimes, depending on the story, I could blur my eyes a little bit and kind of see it as a Murakami story, particularly with the one in Cathedral. Was it Sickness? Fever, that's what it was. But these two stories that I just mentioned, The Last Lawn of the Afternoon and Hunting Knife, when I was reading Raymond Carver's work for the first time, like, wow, I got such similar vibes. And again, Carver came before Murakami, so I'm not saying that there's copying going on or anything. More that the sort of grounded realism, the way that they engage with human suffering, the way it's outsiders briefly coming together over this. But what really separates it, I think, from Murakami's other work is the sort of lack of interiority, in the sense of not that it's not there, but that it's not deeply explored on a deeper sort of psychological level. You're just kind of shown, it's the iceberg effect that sort of defines a lot of Raymond Carver's work, where you don't, again, get that insight that Murakami really, I think, is known for, is kind of taking you below the iceberg some and showing you that interiority, literally in some of his books, like Wind Up Bird Chronicle and Kafka on the Shore, diving, like I said, literally into that interiority metaphysically. Same with Killing Commendatore. These two stories just feature a complete exterior look. With The Last Lawn of the Afternoon, you never see inside the woman's heads. You never get that sort of conversation where she sits down and explains things in the same way that, like, taking Barn Burning, there's a conversation about miming, and they have this conversation that's also reflective of her sort of personality and her sort of search for something. Whereas in The Last Lawn of the Afternoon, yes, you come into the daughter's room, you get to see some of the main characters' interiority some, but there's never a conversation with the woman where the woman explains outright what she's feeling. And it's the same way in Hunting Knife, where you have the main character and you, again, get into his head, but the man in the wheelchair, despite the fact that he has a conversation with the man in the wheelchair, literally, like the ending of him swinging out around the knife, you never get that interiority into the man in the wheelchair and what he's thinking. So you're really just left having to fill in the blanks for yourself. And it's not a matter of one being better than the other. Again, I feel sort of in my failure to articulate here that I'm suggesting that most Murakami works tend to tell you and be more blunt as opposed to showing. And that's not the case. It's just different types of showing versus telling. It's not like the conversations in Barn Burning make that story any more easy to interpret than what goes on in the Last Lawn. And speaking of Barn Burning, I might as well talk about it for a minute, because it went on to make a movie called Burning, which absolutely fantastic movie. My favorite movie. The fact that it's a Murakami movie, almost like, yeah, it's what got me into it, but the movie stands on its own so well. And the interesting thing to me before the movie aired, because this story I had actually read and enjoyed, because I think the sort of primary interpretation of the main character as a murderer is, I don't agree with that at all. I think it's too surface level. I think it misses the point. I can point to some points in the story where that just doesn't make any sense at all. Or not the main character being a murderer, but rather that the guy that she was dating was a murderer. I think that that's not the point of the story, and I think it reduces it to kind of a murder thriller when there's way more going on there in terms of the psychology of the character. And I love what they did in the movie with how they chose to adapt that, and the way that it added to the story while still retaining the flavor of the story, the way that they had to sort of be more focused due to the length and sort of remove some of the ambiguity and implication, but the way they added new ambiguity and implication into the movie, and the way that it uses it as a jumping off point into something bigger, something greater, and just absolutely my favorite film. And it comes from a story that is unto itself, I think, really great, really haunting, and one that I just keep rereading sort of over and over and over again, because it's just such a fun little Rubik's Cube of a story. And when I talk about Murakami's later works versus his earlier works, that sort of blatancy. God, I have to be so careful with how I articulate this. Again, his later works make the A to B very clear. So what you're doing is you're looking for details along the way to better appreciate the journey. Whereas his earlier works feel more like a Rubik's Cube where you don't have the end solution. So you're just flipping things around, trying different things, trying different combinations, and seeing if it makes a certain kind of sense. So there are two different types of Murakami as a writer, and they both have their merits. I don't think one is better than the other, and that's exactly why The Elephant Vanishes is above Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman in my personal list, because I just think that it has more of that sort of early Murakami, nice, Murakami style, and if you're looking at them as a whole, as a collective, then that's where I think its value really lies. It's not necessarily the quality of the stories themselves, because I think they're kind of on par. It's just the fact that Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman feels like a more that sort of intermediate stage Murakami, whereas The Elephant Vanishes just has this sort of wackiness and energy of early Murakami. Which brings me at last to my personal number one favorite, and damn, is this a surprise to be saying for me, but it's Men Without Women. And the reason that this is such a surprise to me to be able to say is that it was actually one of the earliest Murakami short story collections, probably the first that I picked up. It might have even been new back when or the paperback had just come out, back when I first tried to read it, which again, I wasn't into short stories. So I read Drive My Car, didn't really think about it much, and didn't even proceed to read the rest of them because, again, short stories, I just wanted to read novels. And I just kind of put it on my shelf. And the other thing is, I much prefer first person to third person. And I was under the impression, for some reason, that all the stories were for third person, which it doesn't really matter in the sense that throughout his work, throughout these sort of short story collections, aside from first person singular, I think even The Elephant Vanishes is entirely third person, but otherwise, actually After the Quake is entirely third person. And this one, though, has both. Mostly third person, though. But sort of having that memory of Drive My Car, which I watched the film when it came out, and I need after rereading this to go back and watch the film. I just have not had the time because the film is way longer. It's a pretty long film. I just sort of had the impression in my head of it just being like something that other people praise, particularly because, while I actually do enjoy romance in stories and diving into relationships between men and women, as somebody who doesn't live with a partner, who has never even so much as gone on a date, because I have my own life goals and I don't want to have anybody sort of wrapped up in them. I want the freedom to be able to go and move and act as I want without having to consider somebody else in that equation, because I believe that you owe your partner certain considerations, and I'm not willing to concede those considerations. Therefore, I don't want a partner. I don't want to burden somebody with my shit. So in that sense, the title Men Without Women, it's so petty to say, but like ideologically kind of fucks me off a bit, because I think that people can be independent on their own, but I also believe that finding the right person can push you to become a more rounded and better individual. So in that sense, like this is not a collection that I was particularly looking forward to. And yet right from the start, and I should mention that my copy of the book, the UK copy of paperback of this book, which you will see the cover of, because I always put the cover of the editions that I read, has a printing problem where they printed way the hell too close to the inside of this sort of spine. and you have to really crack it open. And it's stupid because there's so much space on the outside margins that isn't getting used. Like the margins, like, it's just a printing fuck up, and it's infuriating. And there's nothing I can do about it. So yeah, just not even, like, even just looking at it to read it is a pain in the ass. But damn, is it worth it? Drive My Car. Like, no wonder that got made into a movie, because that is such a multifaceted story and such a beautiful insight into how life becomes complicated in ways that we can't imagine, and in ways that there's no right answer to it. To ask sort of the question, again, without spoilers, to ask the question and risk damaging the relationship that you have, versus now being in this position where you have to carry the absence of an answer with you throughout your entire existence. Like, oh, just great dilemmas, great conflict, great portrayals, great depth to the relationships between not just the main character, but also his driver, the sort of loss of autonomy and regret and everything. Like, this is just peak storytelling. Fantastic job. And then it comes up yesterday, follows it up, which once again, just great dynamic to the story, great essence of sort of no right or wrong, just these sort of things happen in life and how it impacts people and how people move forward in spite of it. Just such a great dimensionality to the relationship, which is at once tragic, but on the other hand, again, not tragic by necessarily any fault of the characters, but tragic by the way human nature just is. By I don't want to say fate or destiny, because that sounds like there's a sort of teleological purpose to it, but that just sort of things happen and they can be tragic. And how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that? How do you move forward? And admittedly, I feel that those two are far and away the standouts of the collection. And but that's not to say that there aren't other ones that I enjoy. Like Kino, I also really, really enjoyed. To me, Kino is a sort of prototype for Killing Commendatore. I don't think I've seen anybody else bring this up, but so much of the character's journey in Kino feels like it was expanded upon in Killing Commendatore. So much of his arc feels very similar to that character's arc in Killing Commendatore. But unlike Man-Eating Cats or Tuesday's Woman, Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, this is still its own story. It wasn't, he didn't take the exact character and expand it, or take this exact scene and expand it. It is still very much its own story, and one that I enjoyed immensely. And ultimately, the reason that Men Without Women is at the top of the list, it's not just for those two stories, but hot damn, it would be difficult not to include it just for that. But for the fact that every single story in here feels like Murakami at his best. Feels like it is exploring just human nature, human relationships, humanity, the interiority, the exteriority, the circumstances. It's all so layered. And it does it. Sort of the one thing about this collection, aside from Kino really, is that there's not a lot of his trademark magical realist elements or surrealist elements, which for me is a bit of a drag. But it's also just the fact, and I've said this before, I've said this so many times, I feel like I say this in every single review. Like, I like surrealism for the way that it allows you to interpret things and interpret circumstances, but it's not necessary to accomplish that feeling, and that's exactly what happens here. He accomplishes the same challenging the reader to sort of think about themselves, to think about how they take the story, to think about who's in the right, who's in the wrong, who do you sympathize with, so on and so forth. He accomplishes that in just so much, like, God, I feel like I'm falling back on these sort of like book quotes that don't really accomplish anything. Like texture is the word that I want to use. Like there's just such texture to these characters, to these stories, and it really does. What I mean by texture, what it really does come down to, is just the fact that you understand these characters well enough, and the situations that they're in are situations both brought upon by their characters, but not situations in which somebody is behaving wrongly or behaving incorrectly. And consequently, it challenges you to think about, how would you react in this situation? What would you do in this situation? And because there is no right or wrong answer, because of the just sheer sort of challenge of these situations, the answer really reveals a bunch about you as an individual. And so while these are in many ways his most fleshed out stories, I also feel like if you were to discuss these stories with other people and talk about them, you would really end up finding out a lot about yourself. And to me, that's the best aspect of Murakami as a writer. I've talked about this in the past. To me, Murakami really brings out in people a lot of, you get what you put into it. It's almost a mirror to you as a reader. And again, I always say this, it's not necessarily in terms of whether you like him or don't like him, but what you take away from it, what you focus on, what characters you sympathize with, what characters you don't sympathize with, what characters you criticize. And in that sense, Men Without Women is the absolute, for me, peak. It is absolutely a case of quality over quantity, which, again, like, when you say quantity over quality, or quality, either way, whenever you say it, it's sort of an implication that the other is lacking. But that's not to suggest that The Elephant Vanishes or Blind Willow Sleeping Woman don't have some fantastic stories in them. They absolutely do. In fact, they both have stories in them that I would place above some of the stories in Men Without Women. It's just that Men Without Women, of the 7 stories that it does have, they are all so high quality, with the first 2 in particular just being absolutely peak Murakami, just peak short fiction. Well, I can't really say that because I'm not a huge short fiction reader, but just peak fiction in general. That's why it's at my top, absolutely. So that I feel like I've rambled along a lot. And I don't really feel like I've come any closer to understanding how to talk about or review short stories. But at any rate, I hope you've enjoyed this journey through all of Murakami's short fiction. This is not necessarily a recommended reading order. Despite everything that I've said, and I do think that Drive My Car and Yesterday are both fantastic stories. If you're going to read any of these, and you want, again, more surrealist, crazy, wacky Murakami, start with The Elephant Vanishes. If you want sort of the most variety, the most balance, go with Blind Willow Sleeping Woman. But if you just want absolute peak, Men Without Women. If you really like Murakami's most recent work, go with First Person Singular. And after you've read all of those, go read After the Quake. But really, what a tremendously satisfying and rewarding experience it has been to read through all of these things. And not just in the fact that I enjoyed reading them and I discovered so many new dimensions to my favorite author, but also just in the... and it also led to me discovering Raymond Carver, who I also absolutely adore so far. But just... I mentioned in the past, or I mentioned in the Raven Carver video, I mentioned the Stolen Bicycle video. Sometimes I just, sometimes I talk about a book. Sometimes I get to talk about a book. And just about any time I talk about Murakami, it really does just feel like a pleasure to be able to share my love of this author and to hopefully try to encourage people to check him out in a way that they hopefully can get something out of it. because he is somebody who I feel has so much to offer the world beyond just a good story. That he can help people reflect and challenge themselves, which really feels like something, not to get super political here, but it feels like people, something that a lot of people struggle with in a broader thing, this sort of idea of looking inward rather than lashing outward. And which isn't to excuse all the problems that are going on in the world today, but to find a sort of inner happiness and learn how to persevere and enjoy life in spite of all those other things, and to not sort of get dragged down into these sort of miseries. There's a famous quote by Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. And Murakami, just for me, his feels like the examination of life on that very deep interpersonal level where true happiness comes from. Because there's the old adage, if you can't be happy with yourself, you can't be happy in a relationship. And it really does just come down to that idea of happiness has to come from within. If it comes from external sources, then and to a certain extent it's always going to come from external sources. I don't mean this as a hard fact, but if you can't sort of have that inner peace, that inner balance, that inner contentment, you will never be happy long term. So yeah. Just a bit of a heavy way to end it, but I just find that it was such a reflective, self-reflective, introspective journey reading through all of these, and it felt like I wouldn't really be doing a proper review if I didn't try to at least articulate some of that feeling, some of the weight, some of the heaviness, some of the thoughts that these stories have given me, and some of the joy that these stories have given me. So this is very different from my format. Next time I'll be talking about Serotonin by Michel Houellebecq again. I'm returning to Angry Frenchman for God knows what reason. So see you then.